Hello, my name is Cami Paulsen. I'm a senior customer success manager with Okta, and I consider myself lucky to work with longtime Okta customer Avery Dennison. And it's my pleasure to introduce Niro Cantillo, Senior Manager Enterprise Security. Thank you, Niro. Welcome.
Thank you, Cami. Good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity bestowed on me to speak to you a little bit today about Okta Access Gateway and all the work that we have done over the past several years with Okta. Uh, However, before I start telling you a little bit more about all this work that we've done and specifically about the OAG solution, allow me just a couple of minutes to give you a little bit of idea of who Avery Dennison is, what do we do, how long we've been in business. So without further ado, if I may, Avery Dennison was founded back in 1935 by Stan Avery. He was the inventor of the first self-adhesive label ever created. From that idea, uh, 85 some years ago to today, the company has grown significantly. Back in 1990, we acquired Dennison, and by merging both companies, we became Avery Dennison. Interestingly enough, most people actually know of Avery Dennison because of our office products. Every time that I have the opportunity to talk to somebody about our company, um, at the beginning when I tell them, well, I work for Avery Dennison, everybody pretty much, under Avery Dennison, never heard of the company. But the moment that I say, well, Avery labels, the ones that you can actually go to Staples and buy and what have you, everybody immediately remembers, oh, yeah, of course, Avery Dennison, right? That's the company, yes. And interestingly enough, right, um, we are a lot bigger than that. Our company broken down into specifically three divisions: the label and graphics materials, the retail branding and information solutions, as well as the industrial and healthcare materials, makes a variety of products, a variety of functional materials that are being utilized on a daily basis in a multitude of things. Um, from car wrapping, for instance, I'm sure that perhaps at some point in time you ran across perhaps a vehicle that looks kind of chrome, gold chrome, or perhaps a bluish or pinkish chrome. That's a car wrapping product. We manufacture that. Perhaps you have seen buses that have this gigantic billboard um, attached to the bus. We develop the material, or perhaps even in the apparel industry, which is perhaps one of the words that are one of the ones that are at least recognized the most, I would say at this point in time. Companies like perhaps Nike or BCBG or what have you, we make the apparel labels for those, the tagging, the embellishment behind all those different products, right? So it's a multitude of products. In fact, even reflective materials and so on. The list just goes on and on and on. So we are actually a lot more than just the office products that most people became familiar with, right? And now we're utilizing. But you know, enough about Avery Dennison. Let me tell you a little bit about our journey with Okta, when we started, where we are today, all the improvement, all the efficiencies that we have introduced with the solution as a result of this partnership that we've had. Um, we introduced actually Okta sometime in 2014, right? The need for implementing a solution that was going to facilitate or allow us to simplify the way how our users were logging into the applications um, was something that we always had in mind, right? Strategically, we needed to figure out a way how to best improve all of these uh, authenticating challenges that our users were having, right? The company has grown. Every time a company grows, new applications are implemented, new solutions are being introduced, and so on and so forth. And that meant that basically our users were having a lot more and more and more user IDs and passwords to deal with, and so on and so forth. So we, started looking at a solution of sorts um, long time ago, right? At some point in time, we even consider perhaps doing something as simple as perhaps a password vault solution of sorts, just to facilitate all of these capabilities. Um, and The reason being is because at that moment in time, as we were looking at all this, the whole SAML protocol, the whole single sign-on by OpenID Connect or SAML was just in infancies, right? Eventually, it got to a point in which we felt that it was mature enough for us to seriously look into all of this. In 2014, that's when we started doing all of our research with a multitude of company, and finally, we actually settled with Okta. Right when we launched the application back in 2014, we actually had a very motivated team of individuals behind us that definitely were looking at the solution, the promise that it brought. And that's what we did. We went to the extent of launching Okta with our largest application in use at the moment, which was our email system, right? We started with Google and Kentucky, two applications. That's how we started. We went ahead. We knew it was going to be successful. We knew that it was going to be easy, that was going to be easily, um, you know, uh, assimilated by the users working with the solution. And that's exactly what happened. 2014, two applications. We did all the care and feeding, making sure that everybody was feeling comfortable registering their accounts. By 2015, we had integrated an additional 26 applications, and everybody even being more grateful of the functionality and simplicity of authentication that now they were having into their applications. 2016 rolled in, we added an additional 13 new applications, but at the same time, we also added features into our original subscription. Our original subscription was just strictly the standard single sign-on multi-factor authentication, but the needs were growing. New applications were introduced in the company that had additional attributes that under the standard Okta single sign-on were not available. So we looked at the universal directory that Okta was offering at that point, and that's facilitated bringing in this additional set of attributes from Active Directory into our Okta environment. So that facilitated adding additional applications. By 2017, we added an additional 25 new applications. All right, and in 2018, with the release of the adaptive multi-factor authentication, we also took advantage of that. We introduced that additional services into our subscription of Okta and gave our users the ability to utilize and extend the use of additional multi-factor authentication services. Right? We continue in 2019 adding additional 29 applications, and by 2020 the realization came along that we needed to figure out ways how to add single sign-on, if possible, into additional applications that probably were not designed specifically to support single sign-on. And we started the whole process of once again researching in what we did. And at that point in time, we met up with Okta once again. They actually had in their list of services and functionality like a Swiss Army knife, they had the Okta Access Gateway. And that's when we introduced it, we implemented. On top of doing that, we added an additional 28 applications to that. So today, all in all, we have at this point in time a little bit over 163 applications if we take into consideration the last 9 applications that over the past couple of months we have added, right? We have also taken advantage of the ability to integrate with also other identity providers. So the authentication is not solely resting in the Okta solution, but we can actually pass the authentication to other providers, like it is in this case, Mobile Iron, Workspace Space One, or even Microsoft for some of the applications that we use. And at this point in time as well, we are working and conducting proof of concept for the device trust solution. So our utilization and work with Okta continues to grow. And as I said, I mean, fantastic the fact that they actually now have the Okta Access Gateway solution because it's allowing us to bring in other applications. And that's how we started and got into this journey with the Okta Access Gateway as a result of specifically of what. Um, and this is, how we went about it. We looked specifically when we started looking into the OAG, we were targeting laser focus on implementing single sign-on for Oracle. We have a couple of instances of Oracle implemented. right? And we were trying to figure out how do we go about it? How do we once again implement single sign-on in for Oracle, right? Taking in consideration that we already do have an instance of Oracle with single sign-on, but in this particular case, leveraging and utilizing the Oracle Access Management, right? And for all intents and purposes, the Oracle Access Management tool is a feature-rich solution, but it has also similarities, a lot of similarities in what Okta is doing, offering single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, features that we already had, right? So there was no point in adding yet another component to create duplicity in what we already have in place. So a couple of years ago, we implemented a subset of the Oracle Access Management for this one instance of Oracle that I'm talking about, and has been working great. We integrated it with Okta, has been flexible enough to work with us in what we needed to do at the moment under certain specific conditions, right? But as we were looking into the implementation, we had other elements to consider. So we looked at Okta Access Gateway, which is basically a reverse proxy-based virtual appliance. It allows us to integrate leveraging SAML, OpenID Connect with some of those applications. So we did our soul searching, reviewing what we need. Do we need to go with this similar product to what we already have, or can we further extend the functionality of Okta and not having to duplicate things? And that's what we ended up going with. Some of the design factors, as I said, Okta Access, the Oracle Access Management with all the features and all the functionality uh, requires several components for us to implement, right? Somebody probably will say, well, you already have those in there. Why not leverage what you currently have in there? And rightfully so. That will be a question that I would have asked as well. But the reality of the matter is that when you start sharing resources, and especially for two complete separate instances, in this particular case of Oracle, if somebody has a need for a specific feature and now we need to upgrade the one instance that is being shared commonly between them, now it becomes a little bit of a challenge, right? So we consider all that, and we thought, well, maybe not. Maybe we need to either implement a full instance of OAM or find the other solution. Um, with OAG, with the Okta Access Gateway, we felt that it was a lot simpler for us to implement. So we looked at this, settled on Okta Access Gateway, and we moved forward with it. Architecturally, right? As you look at this, Okta Access Gateway has just the two virtual appliances that we use in a high availability kind of implementation. That's what we have. With the Oracle Access Management, the architecture require a little bit more components. There is an EBS access gate, there is a gateway, there is the Oracle Access Management, there is the Oracle Internet Directory. So several different components to deal with. All right. So simplicity was crucial, and that's exactly what we got with the Access Gateway. In our criteria, as we were looking at the implementation of this, there were several elements that we actually took into consideration, right? Some of those elements that we're talking about, and specifically was the speed to impact we needed to consider in here. How quickly can we release, implement, and leverage single sign-on? Yes, as a project, granted, we could have gone several months implementing and doing everything that we want, but we needed to try to be as you know expedient as possible. We looked at some of the elements and some of the considerations that we took when we implemented originally the first instance of Oracle with single sign-on. And one of the things that we learned at that point in time was normalizing users' IDs was crucial, right? In the first instance of Oracle, when we implemented that one, as a strategy from the very get-go, we agreed that we needed to normalize all IDs. Any user ID that was going to be created was going to follow one specific standard, right? And that's exactly what we did. So from an original implementation on that instance, it was simple. However, this new instance that we were tackling, this new instance that we were trying to implement single sign-on, was not going to be that simple because it was a legacy instance of Oracle, one that grew over many years, and it had a multitude of variants in the way how the IDs were created. In some instances, some users had employee IDs. In some other cases, some of the users had first name, last name, or first initial, last name, even all the way up to email addresses. So considering normalizing all of that work, approximately 4,700 different users, was going to be time consuming. It wasn't going to be something that perhaps we were going to be able to script and implement and execute in just a couple of hours. There was a lot of things to consider, right? So we evaluated that. Then we had, okay, if we do the normalization of the data, how quickly can we do it? We estimated a couple of months to do that without major impact to our users, right? So we didn't want to extend the project, right? Um, we didn't want to go on the project, on the implementation for another 6 months, just doing all of this, implementing, building servers, loading software, testing, connecting, and doing all these different components and integrations. We wanted to be as quickly as possible. With OIG, I'm happy to report that in reality, the implementation uh, just took a couple of hours. It was that simple. The requirement of the solution from a hardware point of view for OIG was just strictly building it to VM, right? From a operational procedure that we have in the company, opening a change request to ask for the two VMs that we were going to utilize in which to load the software, perhaps I will say was the lengthiest of time that we had, right? Submit the request today, servers will build by the following day, and then get together with the support team to start loading all of the software appliances to build the VMs and start the configuration. Um, at the end of all of this, if we were to look at the whole implementation and if we were to consider putting all these hours together, how long probably it took less than a day. And I'm talking about 8 hours for the day, by the way. User experience was also something that we consider. Um, how difficult is it going to be for the user? Not as much as the sign on, please don't take me wrong. Single sign on is single sign on. We understand that. It is the user experience from the point of view of I'm having issues logging into the application. How do we go and how we respond to that? How quickly can we actually solve the problem? So that aspect of the user experience was also critical for us to consider, right? Because of the complexity um, and the Oracle implementation that we did, and by all means, this probably was as a result of our implementation, right? Um, Probably was the way how we implemented. But today, whenever we encounter a user that for one reason or another is not able to sign in, uh, most of the time, by the way, um, due to human error, our own faults, not the technology, it's our faults. Um, we create the user, the information probably was not entered correctly because we have everything tied from our HR system into Active Directory. So we create a new employee is hired, enter into HR. If there's a typo in that account, that typo is replicated to Active Directory, replicated to Okta, replicated into Oracle, replicated into the Oracle uh, Internet Directory. So it's replicated through all these different systems. Now we need to fix that problem. Depending where the typo is, some of the updates in PeopleSoft will replicate all across the system. Some of the updates will not. And again, that depends upon what type of typo is, or where was the typo done, in which particular field of the data the mistake took place, right? So troubleshooting our experience at remediating an issue that we may have with a user in the Oracle Access Management SSO integration tends to be a little bit lengthy, right? And I have to say there's been times in which it has taken a little bit longer than 30 minutes, an hour, a couple of times it's been a couple of hours, right? Just to figure out, okay, where did we make the mistake? We got to go and fix in here. We got to do all of this. Also, the fact that if the account it is enabled for single sign-on strictly within the Oracle solution, we need to unbind the single sign-on feature from the ID in Oracle, fix the problem, rebind it again, right? Well, with all of this that I've been telling you about in the solutions that we implemented, so the lessons learned that we had in here is that basically, and again, right, all goes back to our implementation of the Oracle solution and what we saw, right? That depending upon what implementation you are doing, how you're doing the implementation, right? There might be a need for you to actually set up and configure additional parameters, attribute, right? Um, outside of what perhaps are required within the application itself. Uh, with OAG, by the way, same situation. Something that we learned, and this was during the POC phase that we did, um, when you configure, this is done at both places, at the OAG console level, where you create all of these um, interfacing with your application, where you define the parameters, the authenticating URLs, and what have you, you also do identify which particular SSO ID you intend to transfer as part of the authentication, or at least in your SAML assertion, it is that you're going to be sending. Um, if you're planning to send a mixed bag of SSO IDs, which those are configured within the Okta main console, not the OAG console, right? When you assign the application to the user, if the application is set to any variance of the SSO ID you intend to utilize, the one that basically rules what needs to be sent is what you configured within the Access Gateway application settings. All right. In our POC, what we did was that we defined, for testing purposes, it was only we're going to submit employee ID number. Right. That's what we're going to utilize. That's what we said that we were going to be using in the Access Gateway. Then we went to the Okta main console, set up a couple of users. We set up some users with employee ID number, and we set up some users with email addresses just to see what was going to be the behavior. Turned out to be that those users that were using email addresses were not able to function because from OAG, we were still sending the employee number, right? That's what it was reading. So we learned right then and there that if for our use case, because of the fact that we had this mixed bag of Oracle IDs, then we had to configure the one setting for that in OAG to be the app user username. That becomes flexible enough for us now in the Oracle in the Okta main console for us to be able to configure uh, the different IDs as we need, according to the users themselves. I would like to end this conversation just to reiterate, right, the value that we have seen strategically in our entire digital transformation that we have in the companies, the initiatives that we have, how Okta has been um, a key component of this transformation strategy, right? Um, the reality of the matter is that for as long as we have applications, for as long as we continue to have users with the need to authenticate to an application of sorts, right? We need to find and provide a better user experience. We need to provide them not only with a better user experience, but we need to also make our security stronger. We need to be able to provide them with mechanisms that will strengthen the authentication process, validate who they truly are, right? And overall, the experience of it, not only from a user point of view, but from a company point of view, benefit itself, right? And overall stronger security aspect when it comes to identity and access management. So our digital strategy continues to grow, and it is very, very closely tied to our identity and access management solutions that we're implementing, right? How we make all this experience easier, better, flexible, and secure for our users. Without a doubt, uh, the implementation of Okta made all of this possible for us. And as I said, I mean, proof of that is that we have 163 applications as of today and continue to grow. Um, we are looking at introducing additional applications at this point in time. The flexibility and the functionality that the Okta Access Gateway brought to our overall single sign-on solution that Okta originally had introduced now allows us to look into applications that in the past we felt we will not be able to provide single sign-on. We will not be able to, bring into the fold of the multi-factor authentication. There are conversations internally about implementing this intelligent access, adaptive access that we want to have for the company, right? Some companies refer to it as the zero trust solution. Well, we're looking as well into all of that. And we have come to realize that any type of intelligent access is closely linked to the way how the users are going to be authenticating, right? So the more we can actually facilitate this authentication, the more we can actually provide mechanisms by which our users will be able to identify themselves and give them access into the applications, no matter how segmented it is, no matter how control and secure the access is. If the authentication to the user is frictionless, the better, right? Adoption of the solution becomes a lot easier. Right? This is all the functionalities that the Okta Access Gateway now is bringing for those legacy systems that we have internally that in the past, as I said, we were not considering that we were going to be able to leverage. There are other functions and capabilities that I mentioned earlier that Okta has to offer, which it is the device trust, right? We also have the ability to look into that, bring all this put together into one single functionality solution, and we are making our security posture stronger within the company. Now, I would like to open it for any questions.
Niro, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We're so excited to partner with you in your success. I know you mentioned some of the lessons learned. I wondered if there was anything unexpected, an unexpected benefit that you might have come across during the project.
Well, I'll tell you things that were unexpected and unexpected benefits. I have to say first, the first one, right? And I'm grateful for the partnership that we have with Okta. Grateful for the team that has been supporting us all along, right? And every time that we have a conversation, every time that we have a question, and I go to you, Cami, Ian, and the rest of the team with questions and what have you, right? You guys always make things sound so simple. Yes, we can do this. It's easy, right? But the proof is in the pudding. How you're saying this easy? Show me, right? I just want to make sure. And one of the greatest surprises was that when Ian and you and the rest of the team said that it was going to be easy, it truly was that easy, right? That was
Yeah,
that was a pleasant surprise. Couple of hours,
wonderful.
we were up and running. Yay, fantastic. All
It's
right,
great.
that was a great surprise. The other surprise was, and I mentioned at the very beginning, when we started looking at all these solutions, we were very laser focused. We didn't talk about anything else. We talked about I have Oracle. I can either go with this solution that we already have in house, but that implies that it's going to take us a long time for us to implement, right? What do you have for us? And we talked about the Okta Access Gateway, but it was very laser focused. We never talked about, oh, by the way, you're not only limited to using OAG strictly for Oracle, right? You can also introduce other applications. And that was a very exciting benefit of the solution itself. I alluded towards the end that there were applications that in the past we never thought that we were going to be able to do it, unless, of course, we upgraded them to a newer version with SAML capabilities built in or OpenID Connect built in. But the reality of the matter was, yes, we might probably get to that point. We may either retire the application or upgrade the application in the near future, but sometime the near future means a year from now, 2 years from now, right? Now, because of the flexibility of OAG, whether it is a Kerberos-based application, a Microsoft Kerberos-based application, or whether I'm using a sample proxy type of implementation or a header-based type of implementation leveraging OAG, now those applications that I was referring to earlier, now they can be introduced. So that was a pleasant surprise, definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Niro. I have one more question for you before you can answer some of the questions below in the chat. What advice would you give to others that are considering similar goals as Avery Dennison with Okta Access Gateway?
Like with any other advice, right? This is our experience, and we had great success in our implementation. The advice that I will pretty much give everybody is to at least just conduct a POC. You need to do that POC to truly appreciate the simplicity of the solution, right? The flexibility of the solution. There's no need to overthink how all this is going to be implemented, right? It's pretty straightforward. Where are your applications? Where do you intend to put your OAG VMs? Um, how do you intend to authenticate? What method you're going to be utilizing, right? Um, definitely, my advice would be if you're thinking about introducing additional tools, if you already use Okta and you're thinking about, well, I have these other applications that I need to implement, and I'm going to be looking now to another solution, just take a step back, look at the OAG solution, conduct a POC. It's just going to take you a couple of hours to implement, and if it doesn't work for you, well, didn't work for you, but you know, uh, you could go different ways, make things as complicated as perhaps you would like to. My take always is, let's start the easiest way. If it's easy, if it's better, if it's faster, perfect. We got it in place, right?
Thank you so much, Niro, for taking the time to share your story with us. So appreciate it. That's all for the Q&A for now. You can answer some additional questions in the chat window.
Thank you, Gami. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.